Well, hi, very excited to be here today. Anton, thanks for the introduction. So, we're here today to speak about how empowered users equals more money for publishers. And now empowerment and users on the web, that's a really big term. And what does it mean, like an empowered user? Now, I would bet that almost half of you in this very audience are already one such empowered users. Why? Well, there's recent findings that in Ireland, per se, almost 39% of the users are using ad blocking technology. And now ad blockers are undeniably a very strong tool for a user to empower yourself and surf online. But now, ad blocking and more money for publishers, how does this make sense? We'll get to this in a bit, but let us first take a step back. So, how does the web currently monetize? We have on the one side paywalls, and on the other side we do have online advertising. Those are the two predominant models that we see nowadays. And now, what's wrong with paywalls? Actually, there's nothing wrong with paywalls. It's just that they don't work for everyone. So if you take it from a publisher's perspective, you are competing with a lot of free content on the web. So if you are going to charge for your own content, you better make sure that you have very high quality and very unique content. And I'm sure you all know not every website has this kind of content. So, and also from a user perspective, you may not want to just sign up with every single website that you frequently visit, because it creates it creates a lot of friction for you, and you lose overview of where you did put your data, where do you have an account, where did you subscribe. So it's just not a strategy that will work out throughout the web as a monetization method. And then we do have online advertising. Now, what's wrong with online advertising? I wish I could say there's nothing wrong, but truth to be told, we are in a situation where it is a bit different. While the approach of showing ads and thereby financing is good, because as a user we can benefit from great content for free, we do see this situation nowadays. So the issue is that we have a big lack of scarcity online, and there's like an oversupply of ads, and this leads to decreasing prices. So publishers have really taken on with what they're used to, so they did put ads on their site and more, and this has turned out to really frustrate the users. So what they do is they turn their back on ads, and they started to engage less and less with those ads, and of course this is going to result in decreasing prices and decreasing value overall. And but if you're a publisher and you don't really have lots of alternatives and all you know in terms of how to monetize is advertising, what are you going to do? Well, it's pretty likely that you're going to put more and more ads on your site to make up for that decrease of revenue that you've seen before. Now, and this is exactly what's happening. So we do see online that there's almost an unlimited supply of ad impressions. There's ads everywhere. And what publishers have also taken on and doing is that they put actually very, very big and intrusive ad formats on their pages, because this forces the user to more or less re-engage with those ads. And we find ourselves in a position where the publishers are more or less forced to do so, because there's just lack of alternatives for them to monetize their audience. And now, well, if a user is going to a site, it may look like this at the end. So I brought you here a screenshot of a very big German publisher. That's the Bild.de. It's a very, very huge site in Germany, and I guess what you can see here is a lot of green, and actually not much else, right? So if I was a user and I was to come to this website, all that I care to engage with this ad is to find the closing button, right? I mean, I want to go there, I want to consume a specific type of content, and I can hardly see anything. And this is really the time where me as a user, I could get like really frustrated, or me personally, I do. And this is where many, many users will go ahead and install themselves an ad blocker. Now, intrusiveness is definitely a very, very predominant factor for installing an ad blocker, but there's also a lot of other factors that prompt users in doing so. So here are a few. Intrusiveness we've already addressed, but then there's also like very other valid factors such as privacy or also security. And particularly these two have also been mentioned by our dear Edward Snowden, who I think you all know, and he stressed that using an ad blocker is not only a possibility for a user, but that it's rather a duty for the users. Now, privacy, there's scripts that run in the back of the websites, and we see that users are getting more and more aware of it and also concerned about it. They don't want their personal data being tracked, their privacy being infringed, so an ad blocker can prevent that. And in terms of security, there's also big issues with monetizing, for instance. For those of you who don't know what that is, monetizing is essentially when an ad loads and at the same time it comes with a malicious piece of software that will automatically download to your device. And that happens without you even engaging with the ad. So if you go to a site without an ad blocker and the ad loads, it will automatically put that malicious software on your device. So security concerns are definitely also a very, very big factor and a very compelling feature of an ad blocker for the users to protect themselves from this. And furthermore, we also have, of course, data costs, because if you're on your way to work in the morning and you're on the go, you may surf with your mobile, and here it's particularly interesting because here you are paying cash to your mobile carrier, and at the same time, you need to actually pay to view that ad. And yeah, just a fun fact at the side, if you are going to load that ad, the money you spend in terms of buying or paying your mobile carrier for it, is actually going to put more money in his pocket than the publisher is going to make from you viewing that ad. So you do see there's a huge imbalance of online advertising, and it's just not working right. And, then, of course, page load speeds also increase. And this is, of course, on both mobile and desktop. So it results in this nowadays. So it may be because of one of the reasons, or several of the reasons, but we do see nowadays that over 200 million people worldwide are actively blocking ads. And let me put that number in perspective for you. 200 million people, that is the size of Brazil, of the population of Brazil. And now, maybe you're not aware how big Brazil is, but it's the 6th biggest country in the world. And what this really shows is that ad blocking has evolved a lot over the last years. While it used to be like a thing for maybe just male users who were very tech savvy, it has really gone mainstream. And you have a very big audience that is now using those ad blocking extensions. And we have a very big audience that empowered themselves, but how is this going to end up in more money for publishers?
Well, many publishers think the growth in ad blocking is just scary because they only see this as a threat. But I think this is a huge misconception because, in fact, this is also a great opportunity because it allows us to rethink how the web is monetized. And what's really interesting is that almost everybody who installs an ad blocker agrees that ads are necessary and some ads are not that bad. So that's why we started an initiative called Acceptable Ads. And it basically means that all the relevant ad blockers, they have come together and they've evolved from simply blocking all the ads, which arguably is somewhat destructive for the ecosystem, to a more nuanced, more constructive approach. So what that means is that all the relevant ad blockers, they now come with the acceptable ads feature, which means by default, they don't block every single ad that is out there, and they're trying to find a balance between the needs of the publishers to monetize and the interest of the consumer to browse the web in peace. And now, just to give you a little bit of background, out of the top 10,000 websites in the world, roughly about 1,100 now have acceptable ads implemented, which means they show regular ads to the regular users, but users that have opted out of that ad experience, they only get to see certain ad formats that are certified as part of the acceptable ads program because they meet certain quality criteria. And I'll get to which those are in just a second. But what this really creates is a win-win situation in which users have a much cleaner browsing experience and publishers have a way to monetize their entire audience based on basically addressing them on their preferences so that each segment of users is appropriately addressed. Now, for us, it is, of course, key to empower the user. So every ad that a user sees can be switched off. And users always have the ability to turn off any ad that they don't like or switch out all the ads altogether. Which is why it is key that in order for this compromise to work, we have to find the right balance between great user experience and sufficient monetization opportunities for publishers. And we have to find criteria for the acceptable ads program that actually represent the preferences of the consumer. We've done a lot of research on this, including eye tracking studies, and we've developed a set of criteria related to size, placement, labeling of the ads. There are animation restrictions, but we are now handing this over to an independent nonprofit committee, and this committee will have representatives from all the relevant stakeholders, including publishers, advertisers, brands, but also user and consumer groups. And by establishing this committee, we really want to make sure that we always find the right balance and that we can create a new advertising ecosystem in which fewer but better ads actually provide more value. Because what we've been able to prove is that just from a purely economic perspective, fewer but more high quality ads actually provide more value for the publishers because they can charge more. If a user only sees 50 ads a week instead of 5,000, this ad impression has value again. And of course, some of you might think right now there is no such thing as an acceptable ad and I just want to block everything. And I believe that in order to be successful on the web, we cannot force a business model on the consumer. A user has to be monetized on his own terms, which is why it's key that we give choice to consumers over how they want to compensate content creators. And the problem right now is just, as we mentioned before, as a publisher, you only have ads and paywalls. And paywalls only work for very few sites because you need to have exclusive content and a very loyal audience that wants to read your content. Which is why we are now launching a completely new service called Sledda Plus, which is going to be the very first payment system for the entire web that automatically works everywhere without any friction for the user. What that means is that a user who simply doesn't want to see any ads can instead pay a monthly fee, and then this money is automatically distributed to all the sites that user has engaged with based on a very sophisticated algorithm. And by doing this, we're establishing a completely new revenue stream next to ads, next to paywalls that actually rewards great content. Because the more value you create for your readers, the more you will participate in their distributions. Now we'll get into more details in the Q&A that is coming up next. But just to quickly wrap this up, we believe the internet is a user-determined medium, and whether you like it or not, users have the ability to switch off any content that they don't like. They can block tracking, they can block annoying ads, they can block other annoyances as well. So this creates a new challenge for publishers, which is why we at Eyeo, we really want to focus on doing two things. We develop software that empower users so that they can configure their browsing experience, and at the same time, we're working with publishers on alternative, more user-friendly, and therefore more sustainable monetization methods. And we believe that with a combination of a cleaner, much more sustainable advertising ecosystem and a completely new way how users can pay for content, we can really solve the question how the web can be monetized in a much more respectful way to the consumers, because we feel the web deserves a business model that doesn't rely on screwing over the users. So thank you very much for your attention, and please stick around for the upcoming Q&A. Thank you very much.
Well, Till promised a bit more detail on how exactly you find that model that delivers for the publisher and doesn't screw over the end user. To get into that detail, what we're going to do is a Q&A with Till and with Caroline, and we'll also have one of our main moderators back on. She is, if you haven't already heard the introduction, a former CNN anchor, has won Emmy Awards for her broadcast journalism. Will you please welcome back the guys and Gina London.
Caroline and Till once again, ladies and gentlemen, Adblock. Guess what? How many of you out there are consumers? How many of you block ads? Yeah. Guess what? I understand from Noelle in the back, when we were talking before this, Ireland is the #1 user of Adblock by country. So y'all are smart. Also, how many of you, though, are also publishers and put up ads? So there's the quandary, there's the conundrum, right? So Caroline, and I think, Till, I'll start with you. You were talking as you ended up about we don't want to screw the consumer. And so how much of your acceptable criteria has actually been information that you've been able to get from surveying or asking those consumers what it is that makes meaningful ads? What do they want to see?
Well, that is, of course, the key question, that we find the perfect balance between great user experience on the one hand and monetization opportunities for publishers on the other. Because what we are establishing is only able to be successful if we can maintain the support of the consumers, right? Because they always have the ability to switch off any ad that they don't like, which is why we have to find out what kind of ads do users actually enjoy seeing in an ideal world. And for doing that, we have done a ton of research together with our community of users, but also we feel it is important now that acceptable ads is getting so much wide adoption that we make this bigger than just Eyeo, which is why we are establishing this independent nonprofit committee that will take this on further.
Thanks, Till. And Caroline, we were talking about this in the green room together before you came on stage, this idea that there can be a consumer-driven standard about what that looks like, and it's not Eyeo-driven. Tell me a little bit more about this nonprofit then and who you're trying to reach out to so that there's more of a collective voice that's helping change a bit of the direction of ads.
Sure. So in terms of that committee and this nonprofit that we're establishing right now, we're trying to get everyone together so that we will have a joint consent of different stakeholders who are, of course, all affected in one way from ad blocking, so that they can...
Who's on the nonprofit, or who's being invited so far? Is it
sure, it was
publishers? Is it, go ahead.
No,
sorry.
I was going to get there.
Oh,
sorry.
Go right ahead.
No issues. The representatives we want to have there are publishers, of course, advertisers, also ad tech companies, and we will also have, and this is what makes us very special compared to other endeavors that are out there right now, because we've seen this Coalition for Better Ads, but what makes us very, very special here is that we will have an actual user representative.
Great.
So the user side is in there too, and this is, as you know, our main focus. We really want to provide value to the users, but at the same time, of course, keep the web free and sustainably monetized. So we get all these stakeholders together with the user, and the decisions that will be made by this committee will have actual impact. So it's a very tangible thing. It's not just a white paper that will be there, with recommendations, but those decisions made by that committee will have actual impact on hundreds of millions of users.
Where is it in the process in terms of organizing those people that you're speaking of, and then also releasing the findings and, as you said, and having that impact?
So we're still accepting applications on our website, acceptableads.com.
Acceptableads.com?
Anyone can go there and drop us a note if they feel like they can participate in this. but we are hoping that we will be able to have everything up and running in the next quarter or two.
Okay, terrific. And then where will they, when they're up and running, and then what's the expectation for how to get out the message of those findings?
So the expectation really is that we have all the relevant stakeholders together and that they really help us to evolve the acceptable ads program so that we can establish this much more sustainable ecosystem, because we all see that the current advertising model is just fundamentally broken, and this is putting free journalism at risk because there is no sustainable business model right now on the web that relies on ads, which is why we think we completely have to rethink how advertising works on the web. And by establishing this committee, by having all the relevant stakeholders work on this together, we feel like we have a great shot at establishing a much more sustainable approach to advertising-based monetization on the web.
And you're really changing about the way that the internet and technology is still so new in terms of its development, in terms of longevity. I remember years ago when I was a little girl in the United States, billboards were on every roadway. They were just blocking. And then over time, there became an effort to minimize that because it was like a visual pollution. And there was almost this cluttered ad environment going on right now on the web, except for what you're doing. How, Caroline, did you, as a girl, or how did you get involved in this today? What's your own story? How are you a part of this new effort to make it more consumer-driven for what the advertisements are on the web today?
Yeah, sure. How did I end up with Eyeo? Actually, I was always also fascinated with the internet and everything that was going on, like these social platforms and everything that was emerging there. And it was during my business studies that I decided that I wanted to start a company that runs an online business. And I first started working in a domain company, actually. So their name is DomCollect. I guess you may not know them, but they're a subsidiary of Sedo. And while I had a good time there, I thought it was like a very, very specialized niche. And after 2 years, I felt like moving on, and I wanted to do something that has more influence, that is like completely different and more fun and challenging. And I was doing some research, and, well, I was very lucky. I very quickly found this really cool startup in town. Yay. And, well, they had this endeavor to make the internet better. And I thought, this sounds very interesting. So let's take a closer look. And, then found what Eyeo is doing and how impactful it can be, and this great challenge that we're taking on here. And I can only say that so far it's been like an amazing journey, and it's really fun.
And thanks, Caroline. And so you were saying, of course, Till is your boss. And so tell me about as the boss, your vision for how this came about and how it's making such a difference today, and where you feel it can go then with the nonprofit, but in the future.
Well, I feel like nobody has really solved the question so far how the web can be monetized in a sustainable way and in a way that doesn't rely on screwing over the users. So,
where was that kernel for you? Where was that moment where you said, this is missing and I want to address it? Because I know there's a lot of startup people out here, and that's why the Tech Summit's so relevant, because it comes and gives back information and inspirational stories of how you're standing and talking about Adblock is this amazing phenomenon and it's changing things, but there was that kernel Eureka moment that you had.
Well, my background is in online advertising, essentially.
Aha.
And at some point, we noticed, well, many people don't want to see our ads. And then, of course, you can think about how do you react to that. So if people don't want to see your ads, you can try to force those ads on them, or you take that feedback very seriously. And I guess everybody kind of agrees users have a point. There are so many very good reasons why people want to block ads. So how do we deal with that challenge? And once we noticed that the people that install ad blockers, they're not against all advertising. They're not irrational. They don't hate advertising. And they do agree that we need advertising so that there can be free content and great journalism. So the challenge was just how do we bring that together? And of course, with every compromise that you're establishing, of course, this is a controversial topic, but I think we are really trying to solve the big question, how can we solve the question how the web can be monetized in a sustainable way.
Talk a little bit about the controversy, if you don't mind. Talk a little bit about the pushback that you might be getting from your fellow brethren in the advertising land. and yet how you believe that together you can make a change and what you're trying to do to overcome those controversies. I'll start with you, Till, and then have you pick up, Caroline, what you're seeing as well, if you don't mind.
Well, I would say, in a way, we are in between two chairs. So on the one hand, we have to explain to our users why we, as an ad blocking company, don't believe that ads are bad and that ads are necessary. On the other hand, in order to really create change, we need to work with publishers, with advertisers, with ad tech companies. And some of them see us not as the solution to the problem, but the cause of it, which I think is, of course, a misconception.
Because you're inviting them to the table.
And ad blocking is just a phenomenon of the web that is completely unrelated to what we do at Eyeo. Ad blocking is just a thing because the way the technology, the open web works, is that users have the ability to configure their user agent, their browser, in a way that they can decide what is happening on their screen. So this is a new challenge, especially for some of the more established media companies. They don't know yet how to deal with that challenge, but I think more and more publishers now realize that they need a different business model, and just putting out content and placing a banner next to it doesn't cut it. So more and more publishers, they want to have control over how they're monetizing their audience, and they're actively seeking out alternatives. And we know, because the numbers prove it, that our approach actually works.
Are you finding, Caroline, that the conversation's changing then? That some of the naysayers are becoming more believers, or they're seeing that the way that they can step up, like what Till was saying, is going to help them in the long run? Because they'll be connecting better with consumers, potentially?
Yeah, well, overall, I'd say I agree. Of course, it's a very big endeavor with what we're doing, so we're really disrupting something that has been working to a specific point, but there's really two types of people out there. There's the ones that like it the way it was, and they're trying to keep it that way, and there's the ones who are really open to innovation and changes, and they see chances and opportunities there, and they embrace it. And of course, this transition from also really showing these very conservatives how it can be done differently. This kind of education is, of course, difficult at times, but we do see a shift, and our program is actually very successful. So we have hundreds of partners, and this initiative is ever growing. So we do see a change there, definitely.
Where do you see then, after the first round of reports are coming out later this year from your endeavor with the nonprofit, where would you like to see the new monetization go? Imagine a world that you've impacted.
Well, I really believe that we have to give choice to consumers how they want to compensate content creators, because we will not be successful if we're trying to force a business model on them. And our products are basically a combination of a new way how to do advertising in a cleaner, more respectful way to consumers, which actually works better also for publishers and advertisers. But we also want to give choice to those users who don't want to see any ads, and we want to give them a very easy, frictionless way to instead pay for content, so that those users who don't want to be tracked, who don't want to see any ads, they can still participate in the value exchange. And I believe that the combination of those two really can solve the question how we can monetize in a respectful and sustainable way.
Caroline, anything you'd like to add about where you see the future of the advertising vis-a-vis publishing, vis-a-vis consumer-driven approach to all of that ahead in the next coming years?
I'd say I fully agree with Till. I think he got it to the point, pretty much.
Terrific. Anything you'd like to add to this conversation today? Was really interesting from the standpoint, I think, that ad blocking is something that is real and it's out there, whether or not it's done through your app or someone else, that they can do that, but to help that manage then and change the way that publishers are putting ads out and adding the value not only for them, but for us as consumers, is really one that's powerful. And so would you say that you're finding more and more applications and you're finding more and more increased interest from those that were initially saying, oh, it's a controversy or we're going to go around you? They're finding that working with you is the better way?
Well, of course, there's the controversial aspect to what we do, but we have the numbers to support that our approach actually works. And the only reason why we are also successful as a business is because everybody who works with us, at the end of the day, makes significantly more money than before. And I think if we can overcome kind of the controversial aspects that, as Caroline said, are always part of disruption and innovation, then I think we can really move beyond that and can actually all profit from that. And I would really just say, whenever you're trying to disrupt the market, if you're not stepping on a few toes, then maybe you're not relevant enough. And I'm very happy that what we're doing is so relevant, so I think we can take the controversy.
Bravo to you, Till, and to you, Caroline, for stepping on those toes. I remember years ago when there was this disruption about they need to label what the ingredients and what it's included in food, and the industry was so against all of that. And then they found that there are advantages to that because they can demonstrate how healthy they are. They can find a new competition within that. And it sounds like that's what's happening here in this particular arena today, about how it is disruptive, and there are industries that are advertisers who are frustrated, but also seeing that this is the new way, and it's not screwing the consumer, but getting that information, that power back to the consumer so that they can see the advertisements that are meaningful to them. Till, Caroline, Adblock, all of you out there as consumers in Ireland who are the #1 users of Adblock today, and publishers who are looking to work with, remind again the applications are being taken on the name?
Acceptableads.com.
Acceptableads.com. Thank you very much both for your time and for all of you this morning.
Thank you.
Right.